There are moments when an institution accidentally reveals who it really is. Not through speeches, not through ceremonies, not through polished public statements, but through panic, through fear, through how quickly it moves when its control is threatened. And the day Prince Harry and Meghan stepped away, the palace didn't respond with dignity. It responded with retaliation. Not sadness, not understanding, not even negotiation. Punishment. Swift, immediate, ruthless punishment. And that's when everything became clear, because you don't move that fast unless you feel threatened. You don't strip people that completely unless you're trying to make an example out of them. Harry and Meghan didn't commit a crime. They didn't disgrace the country. They didn't damage national security. They didn't embarrass the crown. They simply said two words that shook an entire institution to its core. We're leaving. That was it. No scandal, no betrayal, just independence. And somehow, independence was treated like treason. Within what felt like days, the machine activated. Security gone, protection gone, funding gone, their home taken, their roles erased, doors closed, phones stopped ringing. The message was crystal clear. If you walk away, you get nothing. Not protection, not support, not mercy, nothing. It wasn't administrative, it wasn't procedural, it felt personal, cold, calculated, like the punishment had already been prepared long before they even spoke. And here's the part that people can't ignore. The palace always tells us it moves slowly. They say tradition takes time. They say decisions require review. They say protocol is complicated. We're told everything must be carefully considered. Except, suddenly, when it came to Harry and Meghan, they moved at lightning speed. Funny how that works. When two people choose freedom, the system becomes incredibly efficient. Suddenly there are no delays, no hesitation, no let's wait and see, just action, immediate action, which raises an uncomfortable question. If they can move this fast, why don't they always? And that's where the comparison becomes impossible to avoid, because while Harry and Meghan were stripped of everything for leaving, someone else remained protected. Someone whose name brought global shame. Someone tied to one of the darkest, most disturbing scandals imaginable. Someone who didn't quietly step away, but became a walking crisis for the entire monarchy. And yet, no immediate stripping, no overnight consequences, no ruthless efficiency, no urgency. Instead, time, endless time, careful statements, soft language, quiet protection, years of hesitation, years, let that sink in, years of handling the situation, years of cushioning the fall, years of tiptoeing around disgrace, but days to cut Harry and Meghan off. So what exactly was the greater crime? Walking away, or bringing scandal to the doorstep of the crown? Because the response tells you everything, and what it tells you is ugly. It tells you that independence is more threatening than misconduct. It tells you that disobedience is worse than disgrace. It tells you that leaving the system is more unforgivable than embarrassing it. That's not morality. That's control. That's fear. That's an institution protecting itself, not protecting what's right. Because if this were about ethics, the harshest response would have gone to the biggest scandal. But it didn't. If this were about values, consequences would match the severity of the situation. But they didn't. Instead, the iron fist came down hardest on the two people who simply said, "We choose our own lives." Think about that. Two people asking for autonomy were treated more severely than a man linked to global disgrace. How does that make sense? It doesn't, unless the real threat was never scandal, unless the real threat was never reputation, unless the real threat was freedom. Because Harry and Meghan didn't just leave, they exposed something. They exposed how quickly the palace can act when it wants to. They exposed how protection isn't about safety, it's about loyalty. They exposed how consequences aren't about right or wrong, they're about obedience. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The myth cracks, the illusion fades, the fairy tale disappears. What you're left with isn't strength, it's insecurity. Because strong institutions don't punish exits, they don't retaliate, they don't lash out. Only fragile ones do. Only systems terrified of losing control do. And the speed of that punishment? That wasn't strength. That was panic. Pure panic. Because Harry and Meghan did something no one expected. They walked away and didn't beg to come back. They survived. They built their own path. They spoke in their own voices. They proved they didn't need the palace to exist. And that might be the most unforgivable thing of all. Not leaving, but thriving after leaving. Because if people see that you can walk away and still stand tall, then the institution loses its greatest weapon. Fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of losing protection. Fear of losing identity. Harry and Meghan broke that spell. And once that spell breaks, the system scrambles, which is exactly what we watched happen. Not justice, not fairness. Scrambling. Punishment disguised as protocol. Retaliation disguised as duty. Control disguised as tradition. And the public noticed. Because when the palace moved heaven and earth to strip two people who simply wanted peace, while dragging its feet on real disgrace, the hypocrisy was deafening, and hypocrisy always destroys credibility faster than any scandal ever could. So no, Harry and Meghan aren't the problem. They're the proof. Proof that the system can act fast when it wants to. Proof that protection is selective. Proof that loyalty matters more than morality. Proof that the rules change depending on who you are. They didn't damage the institution. The institution damaged itself by how it treated them. Because sometimes the most powerful protest isn't shouting. It isn't fighting. It isn't attacking. Sometimes it's simply walking away and letting the system expose itself. Harry and Meghan didn't need revenge. They didn't need retaliation. They didn't need to tear anything down. They just stepped aside. And the palace did the rest. It showed us everything. The priorities, the fear, the double standard, the truth. And once you see that truth, you can't look at the story the same way ever again. They weren't punished because they failed. They were punished because they refused to be controlled. And that says far more about the institution than it ever will about them.